Have you ever been excited for a certain game to finally come out only to just end up being a massive disappointment and not worth the hype? On top of my head, I can think of two examples. On the AAA side of things, the best example is Cyberpunk 2077. Everyone was excited for that game and fans had been waiting for years to finally release, only to end up as an unfinished and a buggy mess of a game. On the indie side of games, we have FNAF Security Breach, which not only has numerous amount of bugs, glitches and just overall being a badly optimized game, but also is just a bad game even if you glass over the bugs and poor frame rate.
And I'm gonna shove a beak inside of you, and you are going to be able to talk better. Did you hate the idea that much?
In these two cases, both games were buggy and unfinished. Unlike this game, enter Salt and Sacrifice, a new Metroidvania that was released this year. But before I talk about this game, I want to briefly mention the first one, Salt and Sanctuary. This game was released in 2016 by indie studio Ska Studios. It is basically just Dark Souls but in 2D. I mean, that's what even developers said.
RPG, blah, blah, it's really cool. The best way to round it up is just saying it's 2D Dark Souls. That's really like the best hook for like drawing people in to make it, to like explore it better.
Despite it just being a 2D Dark Souls, everyone praised the game as one of the best Souls-like. And this is an opinion that I do not share. It's not a bad game, I actually think it's just decent, like 6.5 out of 10 type game. It has some really great atmosphere and most of the bosses are fun and very well designed. But the lack of map system, some clunky platforming and some pretty annoying mechanics did hinder my enjoyment of the game. Still, I was excited for the sequel. The sequel could have improved a lot of flaws in Salt and Sanctuary and make it an incredible game. And did they manage to make a fantastic Metroidvania? Well, by the title and the thumbnail, I think you know what I think of it. On surface, it doesn't have any game-breaking glitches or poor frame rate or anything like that. The game itself is just bad. What the hell happened here? That's what I want to talk about. Why this game is bad, what are the flaws and the problems, and how those problems could have been easily avoided. Oh yeah, this will contain spoilers for both Salt and Sanctuary and Sacrifice, so proceed with caution. With that said, let's talk about the world design is not good. One of the key designs in many Metroidvanias is a good world design, with the map to show you where to explore and where to go to the next destination. While the first game lacked the map system for some reason, the world design is done really well. Many branching paths, lots of shortcuts and how it all interconnects is done greatly here. Salt and Sacrifice makes a bold move to not have an interconnected world. Instead, you teleport to different worlds from the hub area. In other words, Demon Souls style world design. This concept isn't bad by itself. If done well, it can make a unique and an interesting world. What is bad in this game is the execution of this type of world. You tackle all worlds in order, so there is no freedom of choosing which world you want to go first. But what is a bigger problem is that exploring is a chore now. First, you can't teleport between checkpoints in the world that you are in, meaning that whenever you go to a hub area and go back to the world you want to explore again, you have to start from the beginning of the world every time. There are shortcuts in the world to help you traverse the world slightly faster, but it is still very tedious to get to the location you want to go. Second, the layout of these levels really make no sense. You start on the surface, then you're underground, then surface, then cave, then some random structure, and so on. It makes it even more difficult to figure out where is your character currently in the relation to the first checkpoint. And it doesn't help that there is still no map to help guide the player where they are. Look, the first game also lacked the map, which was dumb in that game too, but at least you can figure out where you are and where to go and explore, and guess what? The world design made sense in that game. I get it, these two games' worlds are completely different, but at least Salt and Sacrifice could have made an effort for these worlds to make them easy to traverse. And third, and what makes these worlds unfun to explore, is the platforming. It's still clunky as ever. Nope, they didn't even try to fix Salt and Sanctuary's biggest problem, which was the platforming. And I feel like they've made it even worse here because everything is tight windowed, and if you make a slightest mistake, a teeny tiny mistake, you will fall to your death. Again, and again, and again, and again. I'm all in for some difficult platforming, but at least make the movement snappy and responsive. For comparison, the best example of good platforming that has stamina based combat and fall damage in a 2D game would be Grime. The movement is responsive and it feels amazing to control as you try to reach the next closest platform, while Salt and Sacrifice's platforming is just terrible. Like yes, the first game also had some clunky platforming, but not to this extent. So yeah, the exploration, one of the key parts in your Metroidvanias, is badly designed here. But at least combat is good and the game is difficult but
Just, I'm gonna heal and he's gonna fuck me. I'm gonna heal twice. I hit
Like,
all
cool.
four. All four. All four.
Awful.
Oh. Well, this brings me to the next point, which is... How the hell is any of this fair? This is the main reason as to why I hate Salt and Sacrifice. It is hard. Way too hard. Now, I don't want to come across as someone like,
It's too hard. Easy mode, please.
no, that is not what I mean. What I mean is that Salt and Sacrifice has some really annoying mechanics that destroy any feeling of fairness throughout the game. Let's first talk about juggling the player to death. You see, in Salt and Sacrifice, if some enemies hit you with certain attacks, they can send you flying away. Nothing too special, right? Even the first game had this to some extent. Well, no. While you are flying mid-air, enemies can still hit you even more, taking a huge chunk of your health, or even worse, one shot. And this isn't like, oh, certain enemies can do that or only certain bosses can combo you. No, it is every single enemy in this game can combo you to death. I am not kidding when I say 95% of my deaths came from me just being bounced and juggled to death, while other 5% came from enemies throwing me far away and then falling to death. And enemies are way too fast for this game style combat. In Salt and Sanctuary, some enemies were really fast with their attacks, but not too fast. You always had enough time to avoid their deadly attacks and you had plenty of time to attack them back. In Salt and Sacrifice, however, enemies have attacks that don't have enough time for you to dodge, and if you get hit, you either get comboed to death or lose a big chunk of your HP. Also, this game got rid of parrying in favor of blocking and perfect blocking. Not a bad decision on paper, but again, the execution is terrible yet again. First, if your weapon is weak for blocking like daggers, you will lose some health and stamina. So then you might think, well, just try perfect blocking. The problem here is that it takes some time for you to recover from blocking. And if you fail to perfect block, you get hit and then just comboed yet again. Second, you can't equip shields to help you block these attacks. Only Paladin and Vanguard class come with the shield, while every other weapon is pretty much useless to use for blocking. But it's like the game expects you to use blocking to avoid damage, because how so many bosses and enemies have combos that you can't fully avoid by just rolling through them, but it is badly implemented. To give you an example for a good perfect blocking system, look at Dead Cells. You tap the button right before enemy attacks and you still have time to recover from perfect blocking. So yeah, Dex players are kinda screwed in that regard. but also are the strength users too. Salt and Sacrifice added weapon arts, which is cool and all, but you don't get them until you dive into the magic section in the skill tree, so you can't have them. The only good and viable build is just watered down magic. And boy is it busted in this game. You want to play Salt and Sacrifice? Just use magic. I mean, take a look at this. It makes a game a joke. And this is the problem. With magic it is too easy, while with strength and dex it is hard in an unfun way. So what is next? Consumables. They changed this too. Instead of when you rest at a checkpoint and refill your flask and all other things, you have to have certain materials so you can refill healing flasks, and there is a high chance that you will run out of consumables and you won't have any healing items. This is such a dumb and annoying system. It was annoying in Bloodborne and this game is no exception. Overall, this game's idea of challenge is to combo players to their demise while not being able to do anything to prevent these kinds of deaths. And the systems that are implemented to try and prevent these kinds of deaths are either poorly thought out or not tested at all. On top of certain builds being way too powerful, making a game a complete joke, while other builds suffer and make the game way too hard for the players in an unfun manner. And with consumables that you can run out of, making it even more tedious. But that is enough of me talking about the difficulty. Now let's move to the boss fights suck. In this section I will first talk about the regular bosses in Salt and Sacrifice and then talk about them. One of the criticisms some people had with the first game is that it was bloated with so many bosses. 23 in fact. While there were still a handful of well-designed bosses, there were also some hiccups in the boss roster. I'm looking at you, Witch of the Lake. Salt and Sacrifice has only 11 traditional bosses, and that would mean they are better, right?
Nope.
None of the bosses are memorable and are all complete jokes. They don't have anything memorable to them, no personality, nothing interesting at all, and are all just really easy. First game also had some bosses that were forgettable at best, but you also had some really unique fights, like Tree of Men. The boss's visual design is creepy and unnerving, and how you fight a boss is done really well. It's such a memorable boss on the design alone. Also, just a nitpick, but some of the boss names are really stupid. Yeah, the first game, again, that stench most foul. That was a stupid name too. But here we have a new king of the stupidest boss name ever. The worm that does not die. I am not joking. The worm that does not die. Are you serious? The only boss that I kind of liked was the two that remain. Yeah, stupid name again. They play fair, good attacks, good tells, and do pose a bit of a challenge. That is all I have to say about the regular bosses. They are all pretty forgettable. But mages, on the other hand, are memorable. In the worst ways possible. Mages are some of the worst, most frustrating bosses that I have ever fought, and you have to fight them in order to progress the game. Here's a quick rundown how they work. In many worlds there are locked doors that you can't open until you kill a certain number of mages. So you go explore and find a corpse that begins a mage hunt. You begin the hunt and a mage is summoned somewhere. You find a mage who summons a bunch of adds to help him. You fight him for some time and then he teleports and you have to fight him again and again and again until you finally fight him for the last time. In the beginning it was fun fighting these mages, but it quickly becomes repetitive and mages become more and more annoying. And there is no change as to how you fight these mages. They're all the same from beginning to end. This game's boss roster is probably one of the worst boss rosters ever, and the only good boss is just decent at best. Even the final boss is a massive disappointment. But you know what? Let's compare this game's final boss to the first game's final boss. If there was something that I absolutely loved in Salt and Sanctuary, it was the final boss, and one of the biggest reasons for that is the build-up to that fight. Throughout the game you find this mysterious person that is crucified and dead, yet something talks through this dead corpse, and the way it speaks to the player is very mysterious. It's speaking to us as an entity rather than as individual, and the more you find him, the more his language becomes rather unsettling, like how he says all life kneels to him, and the player will kneel to him too. It intrigues the player into wonder of who is talking through these corpses, and when you find the crucified corpse for the last time, it asks you, what does it seek, dominion or survival? And tells you, puppet is my voice, find me. At this point, players' expectation is quite high and makes you even more curious as to who is the voice. And then you finally get to the Still Palace, the only area in this game that has its own soundtrack. And you come across the first NPC that you talk to in the beginning of the game and tells you what is happening in a vague sense. As you progress through the area, you notice that there are no enemies in this area and the whole palace is upside down, making you wonder even more what is truly going on. Then you enter the boss room and you come across him, Nameless God. The final boss of the game, the one who was behind the voice of the corpses, the one who is responsible for everything that is happening in the game, and the final challenge to face against. And he fights you unlike anything else you encountered. He is fast, relentless, yet fair, fun, and well designed. Some of his attacks require to dodge them in a different way, like his beams of lights attack where you had to jump on the wall 2 times in order to safely avoid this deadly attack, and dodging his 4-hit combo feels satisfying to avoid. And he is the only boss to have his own soundtrack, and it is so good. Just listen to this. Absolutely phenomenal boss, and he is one of the best bosses of all time. Now let's compare him to Undone Sacrifice. Let's start first with build-up. Any hints at the least? Oh no, there is! Right before the final boss you get exposition as to who is the final boss and what he tried to do. There was exposition in the first game, but at least you have this corpse talking to you. Okay, so not a great start, but maybe the final area will be memorable and... oh, it's just the same looking previous area, but with the red tree in the background. Okay, maybe the boss looks cool and... oh my god, wait, is that just reskinned Nameless God? Okay, let's cut this crap. The build-up is almost non-existent, and the area itself is just bland. Not terrible, but when compared to Nameless God's build-up, it pales. Well, okay, build-up is not good, but maybe the boss himself will be good. Let's look at his moves. He's got spin, poke, charge, throwing sticks, and he's dead. Wait, that's it? That's all? That's the final boss?
My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined.
Yeah, even the final boss is a complete pushover. He doesn't pose any challenge, is way too easy compared to the horror that is the final area of the game. I wish I had more to say about this boss, but there's just nothing interesting about him whatsoever. Even the music is forgettable compared to the Nameless Gods theme. What a joke. In conclusion, Salt and Sacrifice is one of the most disappointing games I have ever played. The game's idea of difficulty is to throw players in unfair situations and expect them to somehow survive. The clunky platforming that leads you to guaranteed deaths, bosses being either a complete joke or just awfully designed, mage hunts being some of the most tedious and frustrating elements in this game, the world design being a confusing mess, poorly thought out blocking system, certain builds being way too underpowered while the magic ones being way too overpowered, and the final boss being a complete pushover. Overall, Salt and Sacrifice is a bad game. It is of a poor quality, and many people's reaction to this game is polarizing. If someone would ask me should I play this game, I would not recommend it. Instead, go play the first game again. Sure, it has some flaws too, but it is miles better than the sequel. Or even better idea, install the Ascended mod for Salt and Sanctuary. Sure, it's hard, but it's fairer than the Salt and Sacrifice. That is all I have to say about this game. Thanks for watching, and if you excuse me, I'm gonna go to the corner thinking about all the hours I wasted on this game. Goodbye everyone.